at IIT Mumbai. So,
Thank you. Good afternoon. Yes, about something which is a challenge that we have taken on ourselves, but let me get to the crux of. Can you hear me at the back? Bit louder. Bit louder. More loud. That we are in India. I'm just going to talk about the local ecosystem. In India, if you look at the situation right now, how many of the gadgets that you use in your labs, offices, or factories, hospitals, anywhere, gadgets which are supposedly high-tech, are made here? Anyone with an exception? There are a few exceptions, but do you realize that almost nothing seems to be getting done from here? And if you realize this, that we are 1/5 population of the globe, and I'm a scientist as I was introduced, and it won't take more than high school arithmetic to figure out if you are 1/5 of the globe, and if everything was just left to randomness, you should have been producing 1/5 of what the world is doing. On an average, we should have been doing. Are we doing? Yes, law of averages. Are we doing anything close to 20% of what the world is doing in terms of innovation, technology development? So there's a problem here. But the good news is, there's a good news in fact, in realization of this. The good news is, because it's so extremely lopsided, it should have been 20%, it's not. The scientists, really start to think, well, if it's so extremely lopsided, there must be a reason behind it. And so we just need to understand what the reason is and cover it up. So if we can do that, this billion-plus population that we have will literally create a dhamaka internationally. And that's exactly what I'm going to get to you and try to show you a glimpse of what we are doing and try to also make you a small inventor of sorts. So let's. So the three labs that was introduced, we have a big ambition. We want to be quote unquote what the Bell Labs used to be. How many of you have heard of the Bell Labs? What it used to be? Oh, good. So the ace place where R&D used to happen in the world. And I'm not meaning only rhetoric right now. It's okay to stand on the dais and say that I want to be the Bell Labs and throw a slogan. No. We are going to tell you of a formula, an algorithm by which we can do this, literally transforming each one of us into becoming someone extremely productive. I mean, I'm happy to see the theme has already been set on the track. So we actually say invent the inventors. But invention sitting in the lab is no good. So we say that take it to the society, and our vehicle is entrepreneurship. And we think that's also an algorithm. So we say create entrepreneurs. And this we have created in an interesting structure, which I will elaborate. Essentially, the Tree Labs is not privately owned. So it is like a commons movement. So the prof in me is immediately up here after your good lunch with a quiz. The quiz is, you recognize what this is? Yes, Kulfi. Now that is the quiz I have for you. How was Kulfi made? Kulfi is an old dessert. We have been having Kulfi hundreds of years back in India. I mean, the rich people used to have it. How was Kulfi made in the heart of India in the days when the conventional refrigeration that we know of didn't exist? Ice used to come from?
Western countries.
Western countries. Actually, you are right, but that was only when the British came in. Okay? That story is also interesting. It used to actually be shipped from UK.
That's why ice house is there in Chennai.
But what about 400 years back?
Ice house in
Yeah. What about 400 years back when the British was not there?
Matka.
Well, I'm not expecting you to, but Matka, I'll tell you the simple answer. Matka will not create ice. It will cool.
Yeah.
But thermodynamically, it cannot create ice. Okay, it can cool, but it will not create ice.
black salt?
Salt? Yes.
Salt, black salt.
Well, salt to a certain extent, but again, If you have to add salt, it has to be a liquid already. How do you make the ice? It will cool. That remains a quiz. But let me put in perspective. Why am I talking about this in a Computer Society of India talk here? What has this got to do with computing? Of course, it has innovation, but it's a very broad spectrum. You might say innovating for XYZ thing which is not at all related to computers. So, a couple of reasons. Reason one is more guided from the scientific point of view. You see, today, almost all the cutting edge science that we see in the world happening today is happening like a corporation. The Human Genome Project, the top quark, the Higgs boson, you know what big industrial mega houses those are that are doing these projects? Name it, they are almost all big projects. And the kind of data that they are handling, huge data. You need supercomputers crunching those numbers to figure out, make any sense of the tiny wobble that shows an extrasolar planet somewhere. Now all of this has one thing in common. They are all energy guzzlers. So computing, you may do it in the vacuum, in your mind, but the real computing machinery requires a lot of energy to be burnt. Anyone has guesses what kind of energy? So we are in the days where we are downloading, data is streaming. So on an average, even 1 MB of data corresponds to burning a coal about this size. 1 MB data. So 1 GB movie that you downloaded will be a pile of coal this much that is burned on an average. This is happening day in and day out. The data centers which are existing all around the world today, they guzzle power like a small town in itself. And you know what most of the energy is going in? Yes. Nearly 40% of that energy goes into cooling directly of the data center servers. Nearly 40%. Do you see a connection that I am getting at right now? So, could there be a way by which we could create machines, systems, which are extremely energy efficient? So, as a concrete example,
I thought just one way that
Yes, please.
you can convert it into the mawa and keep it in matka. Milk can be converted into mawa and then it can be cooled into the matka.
yeah, but the essential thing is to get to below 0 degrees centigrade, which is ice, you need a different mechanism. It will cool, certainly if you are in a hot environment, it will cool maybe 10-15 degrees centigrade from room temperature that you are in. But it will not, maybe you can use that as a precursor to make the ice, but the ice itself, well, we'll get back to that, but let me indicate, we'll get back to it. Okay? Let me indicate the colossal amount of power we are wasting in all kinds of things that are happening around us. Not just the computing machinery we are talking about. In each and everything almost. Trust me, I mean, although you are with primarily a background with computer science, what I'm going to talk about is high school arithmetic. Nothing more than that. So let's take an example of a treadmill. Many of us have in our homes, or at least in the gyms that are around, we see the treadmill. Now this thing, I've just written down a few things that you need to know. Let's say assume I'm a 100 kg person standing on the treadmill surface, and there's a mat which has to be moved against the surface, so that is friction. So I'm taking that friction coefficient as 0.1, just an estimate. So therefore I will have to, 100 kg means 1000 newtons, and therefore if I'm pulling at 0.1 coefficient, I have to pull that mat with a force of 100 newtons. 1000, 1000 newtons, and into 0.1 is 100 newtons. Now if I'm going at about 5 kilometers per hour, that mat, which is kind of a brisk walking pace, then I should be spending only about 150 watts of power. But each treadmill I have seen on the planet today, they are consuming about 1.5 to 2 kilowatts of power. So which means 10 times more power. Why are they doing it? I don't know. Let's the ubiquitous ceiling fan that you see. This room does not have, but most of the rooms that we normally move around in our daily lives, in India at least, plenty of fans, right? So now you'll have a clue, but I'll let you hazard a guess. None of you are assuming with a degree in making fans, so hazard a guess. What kind of efficiency do you think an engineer will say, I made this fan, this is the efficiency with which it works. And I'll define how I'm going to look at efficiency. A fan is a thingmagic which allows kinetic energy in air to happen, right? Air will be flowing. So whatever you make, if you are calling it a fan, I'm going to make air flow, and therefore I'm going to take the ratio of the energy that I've imparted in air, divide by the energy I've put in. So that's common sense of how efficient. So anybody in the audience hazards a guess what this efficiency can be? 60% is the answer. That's a good engineering guess. Anybody else? You can't go wrong, you're just guessing. Anyone?
Less than 49%.
Less than 40?
9%.
Less than 49%. But would you believe that? Hold your breath. Would you believe this? The brand name engineers that we see, the brand name companies, they are selling you the fan. They'll say high efficiency fan and all that. That's the efficiency they're talking about. Probably they don't even know about it. So the point is, how many of you managed to touch the hub of a fan after it has run for some time? It's very hot, right? And see, it's in an airflow regime. It's sitting in an airflow regime, and still it's hot. So, anyone of you who have done soldering, put that soldering iron on the fan and see how hot it gets. It doesn't get as hot on its own. So I often joke that the fan is a heating device in the room as opposed to a cooling device, because 99% of the energy really is heat in the room that you are making it hot. But by the way, these are just illustrative examples that you plug. Almost everything you see around you will be hugely energy efficient. The water pumps in your buildings, let me not go, efficiency is about 5% on an average. 5%. The typical societies I've seen pay bills in the range of annually maybe in excess of ₹1 lakh. So only 5% of that is basically what is doing the pumping. So these look like non-glamorous areas. People would be talking about quantum computing and the latest hardware but look right under your nose. There are colossal tragedies happening, and we have no recognition of the fact. I mean, am I wrong in saying this? What do you think would be the efficiency of these very efficient lamps that you see in this room, which are purported to be energy efficient? So the point is, it goes on. So let me come to the point now. I mean, you are getting the sense where I'm getting. So it makes sense to talk about energy efficiency as a subset of innovation itself. I'm saying innovation is a much broader thing, but energy efficiency itself is a huge area, and we need to tackle that. If we don't, you will not have your computing hardware running. Why computing hardware? You will not have food to eat. So I put this slide up, and this is just food for thought for you. See, every amount of food that we are eating today in our home, we don't think about it. We think it's a benign exercise. But think about it, right from, I've listed some, right from the fact that food has to be transported hundreds if not thousands of kilometers and reach you, it's burning fossil fuel, some kind of energy. Irrigation, the fertilizer itself, the harvesting, tilling, every operation is fossil fuel written on it. And if you just do the arithmetic, just the math, how much of fossil fuel have I burnt? The numbers are staggering. So even a single tomato would require about a 1/3 liter of oil for you to get it to your plate.
Plus water.
That's another story altogether. Yes, absolutely. So the point is, imagine now if for some reason you did not have the food reaching you, a situation that happens because of energy goes out and you don't have food reaching you. What would be the situation in the places that we are living as society? We'll be killing each other. And do we realize that this is going to happen? Now, I'm not saying that I'm trying to attract your attention on some abstract problem. Absolutely not. This situation of not having food happened to an entire country in less than 2 decades back, right under your nose. Any of you know which country that is? Because they did not have oil, they did not have food, that country. Literally
Somalia.
overnight it happened.
Somalia, Sudan.
Ethiopia. Ethiopia. No, the country is Cuba. So the whole country, just after the Cold War, the Soviet oil stopped, and all their system of food and agriculture, everything was based on oil, and it stopped, and there was no food. So the average body weight of the population went down in excess of 15% during that period, because there was no food. So let me not harp you more on. I think the point is honed. What do we do about all this? We create solutions, and that's inventing. So is inventing easy? Yes, it is easy. So we have a formula for that. And that formula is actually not something that we invented. It was all along been understood by the people who were inventing. So they said, think simple. Do not think complicated. If you are thinking complicated, you are probably not going to invent a solution. So the simple part of the thinking, so it actually clarifies. I put Edison up as a classical inventor, but this applies to zillions of other inventors, including the ones today. They'll believe in this big term that I have written up here. So nothing happened by accident, it happened by work, and by which means systematic work. But it is a simple thinking, not unlike what my earlier speaker was indicating. So you increase your ability to do by a formulation of simple thinking. And the energy efficiency part that we are talking about, am I talking in the air about talking that these things are possible? Can I make a fan which is 80% efficient, 90% efficient? And if I do that, can I do that? Okay, so to illustrate, let me not talk much. I have got one little piece of a demonstration to give you a sense of that these are not talking in the air. These are happening right now in your vicinity, in what we are set out to create, the tree lab. So let me show you this little demonstration. I hope it works. You don't need to be technically very super to understand this. What I'm holding in my hand is an arc welding machine, the welding machines that you see in workshops. So normally, I mean, just to make your mind go through the process, they are usually like big boxes which are extremely heavy. They come on wheels, and here what it will show you is, I hope people at the back can see it, because I'm going to demo a welding right in front of you in the auditorium. So this is a little piece. So anyone cares to just so what do you think is the weight of this?
Maybe less than kg.
800 grams.
So it's actually less than 2 kilograms, and even then, most of the weight is in the cabinet that you can see it's holding this. So this is actually going to be, we'll see a demonstration, but this is going to be equivalent, if we can make an apple-to-apple comparison, of about 200 kg conventional machine, 200 kilograms. But not just the weight, you just plug it in into the mains here. These terminals are live and hot, and I'm touching. Okay, I'm just touching them with my hands. Anybody else brave enough to touch? Okay, fine. No applauses for that. Okay, so anyway, this looks like a toy. It's behaving like a toy. But let's see if it's actually a toy. Please. Well, I'll try. I will test it. So to illustrate it, I will take a couple of hacksaw blades, which I got with me. So this is so let me take a couple of hacksaw blades and try to show you. See, these are just regular hacksaw blades which are broken. So this is just a steel blade, and I'm going to, if you all can't see it from there, I'm just going to show it right here. Okay. So now watch how it is happening. I'm holding these with my bare hands, touching these terminals. Nothing happens except when I start with the welding itself. Okay, there you can see the mortar pool of metal. And of course, if I fuse it, close the molten pool. This whatever happened, it just happened in front of you, okay? And later you all can just come closer and take a look. These are actually welds, and I'm not a welding expert, but experts, when they first see it, they say, this is high carbon steel, it's not supposed to be weldable. So there's something else happening apart from the fact that we have just done this. By the way, I must have spoiled your eyes, right?
No.
See, I didn't allow you to put any eye protection or anything. Neither was I putting on anything. Did you notice that?
Yeah.
So, and most importantly, this I can actually plug into a UPS. In fact, it is connected to a UPS line right now. Okay, I can see that it's written here. So effectively, you can, the amount of energy that I was taking is so paltry as compared to whatever is happening conventionally, that it begs you to ask, what has the world been doing? Now this is just a namuna, an example. So what is happening in this ambition that we have taken up to create a Bell Labs, and as a commons, a Bell Labs that is created as a commons that will literally rock the world, is to invite all the young people of the world and the young at heart to come and create something that the world has never seen before, in a form that you can literally change the way things happen in the world. So, let me see if I have any other. This is, of course, the classic, about the entrepreneurship part, which is extremely important for us. So, we like to take these out into the real world as commercial ventures. And the way we have done is a very happy marriage between commercial and non-commercial paradigm. But one thing is, how many of you know Andrew Carnegie's name? Okay, for those of you who do not know, he was the guy who created steel industry. Anything we know of steel is Andrew Carnegie. And just to give you a sense of how rich this person was, wealthy. That's right. And let me give the figure. In 1900, when he retired from his work, his personal wealth was in excess of $450 million US, $1,900, which is in today's money more than a couple of hundred billion. Personal wealth. Now this person had to say, and I've quoted this, there is no line of business, mark you, no line of business in which success is not achievable. Which means it's an algorithm. It has to work. So, without much ado, this is what Tree Labs, Tree stands as an acronym in front of you. I'm not going to talk much about it in the interest of time, but I invite all of you to come on board and make it a success. Thank you. A design of an ice maker. Now this ice maker has the following specification. Don't throw rotten eggs at me if you hear the specifications. Here's a device we have made which makes 2 to 3 kilograms of ice overnight. but it does not use any input of energy. No input, not solar, not electricity, no nothing. It does not use any input of energy. And this device, we intend to mass manufacture, and when it is done, we estimate the price to not exceed maybe 200 to 300 rupees. Now surely, you think that this what we are talking about is a
All the best for that. All the best.
all the best. It's working right now as we speak.
We are waiting for that.
Okay, now, no, absolutely. The world is waiting for it, and it is actually
Chemicals?
not at all, but it is sound science. The
Jute?
Yes.
Then what will happen
Sorry?
to that E equal to MC square?
Jute.
Jute. Could be, could be. But here is the simplest explanation. Okay, so now this obviously is not a new idea. I was mentioning that kulfi was getting made earlier. So you can see that this is actually published work by the British people. So who were observing how ice was made during those times. And this features in Dharampal's book for all of you who want to take a look at the full article. So this process of ice making, I'll explain the process. Yes, so I think this slide will just explain it. Again, high school level understanding of your science. Heat transfer happens by 3 processes, right? You all remember. Conduction, convection, and radiation. So what we have done is we have made this container, a casserole-like container. So this container is made of an insulator, good insulator. So what kind of insulators are we using? It could be bubble wrap, it could be styrofoam, it could be jute, it could be anything which is a good insulator. That's it. So when we make this container, we make sure that it is fat enough that for all practical purpose, almost no energy is transferred between what is inside and what is outside, conduction wise. So conduction is eliminated. We agree, I mean, that's how we use casseroles. The next thing is, and the water we have kept in this. And this whole structure is sitting under the open sky. That's why I said overnight. So this is sitting under the open sky. A sky which is clear with no clouds, or very little clouds, which is not an unusual thing if you go away from the coastal regions. So this water is clearly, this is water at room temperature to start with. You just put it just after sunset. And this is not going to exchange any heat by conduction. You can see that it is held maybe about 6 inches, the water level is about 6 inches below the surface of this container. I just drawn a cross section, I hope you can understand that, of the container. So what happens is, even if there is a mild breeze, it's not going to create the eddies to have convective losses. So what happens, assume that this water has cooled by whatever reason, then the air next to it is also cooled. This you see all the time in supermarket bins where you have the frozen vegetables and all the open surface. They are all open on the top and you have them cold and frozen below, right? So the reason it works is because the colder air is heavier and it will remain there, and therefore no heat is escaping. The air itself is an insulator. So this part is also insulated. So so convection is also ruled out. The third remains is radiation. This water is at room temperature. Our body is at our body temperature. Sun is at the temperature of the sun, about 6,000 degrees centigrade on the surface. Now, any body which is at any heat, any temperature will radiate. We know that it radiates. That's why the sun gets heated by the earth. So what happens is this water will start to radiate energy out into space. The same way the space is going to radiate energy into the water. But during this night time, there is nothing really to radiate energy into the water. Deep space, at least the one we can see directly above us in the night, is about, it can go up to about minus 55 degrees centigrade, minus 60 degrees centigrade, limited by the stratosphere. If the stratosphere was not there, it would have gone to 4 Kelvin, minus 269 degrees centigrade. It would have gone to that low temperature. So then, but on Earth's surface itself, if you leave this and you make the water level about 2 centimeters, about an inch deep, not any deeper, then you will have the ice forming in about 4 to 5 hours. And these experiments are happening right now. We make ice, so whenever we go out. So that's as simple as that, and we are trying to make sure that these ice makers go out at that kind of a cost point to the remote places, and once ice gets there, all kinds of other things happen. So starting from preservation of food, medical supplies going in, or maybe farmers can gather as cooperatives and create cold storages which do not run off electricity, and they create your computing machinery which can run, all kinds of things happen.